I would like to first of all use this opportunity to thank the rapporteur for this timely and difficult and sensitive but very important report. I totally share the view, a recommendation and conclusion in this report. Terrorism, as we all know, is a hideous crime that we must do everything we can to fight and defeat. We must eradicate it from our societies, but within the universally accepted human rights norms and standards. Following the terrorist attacks in Europe and around the world, because this is a global problem, we've seen an intensification of legislation allowing for the withdrawal of nationality, as we are discussing here today, from the national governments and some of the member states that we have here. And this has led to several implications, as the report very clearly indicated. Under international law, as it is stated in the report, statelessness should be prevented and eliminated, and arbitrary deprivation of nationality should be prohibited. This is fundamental. In any democratic society, it's fundamental. According to the OSCE, Ordeal publication on fighting terrorism and protecting human rights, and I quote, "One of the side effects of terrorist activity and the international response to it has been the tendency to pit the idea of liberty, human rights, and security against each other. The notion of human rights protection has often been presented as being in conflict with the protection from terrorism. This is extremely misleading. Legislators and governments are always required to, at all times, within the scope of our work, to take into account internationally recognized human rights standards and freedoms. And if we, at any given time, fail to do so, we must be held accountable." Madam Chair, I wanted to focus on a very important issue that we normally do not talk about. And it is basically the elephant in the room. When we talk about terrorism, quite often, and we're talking about the people that are against some of the recommendations in this report and conclusions, are saying, you know, when it comes to the rights of citizens and compared to the rights of terrorists, we need to make sure that's the rights of, you know, the normal citizens who are victims of terrorism. Those are the ones that we should prioritize. But terrorism, what do we mean by terrorism? Because in Europe today, we have several types of terrorism, or several groups that are engaged in terrorist acts. But one group that we never talk about is the extreme right wing, the fascist, Nazist terrorism that terrorize people in Europe today. And these are people that are born and raised in Europe, several generations. But these rules do not apply to them. When we're talking about taking away people's citizenship and rendering them stateless, why don't we do the same to those terrorists that are terrorizing our people in Europe today, that are fascists and Nazis in our streets, burning down refugee camps, bombing, shooting people, killing, having school shootings and killing our children? The media never reports that as terrorism. They say they are lone wolves, or they say they have mental health problems. They take them to some mental health facility and say, you know, let's not talk about this. It's double standards that we need to talk about. If we are really, really serious about fighting terrorism, we must make sure we fight all forms of terrorism, regardless who is behind it. But as I see it, it depends on who are the victims and who the person that commits the terrorist crimes, what background that person has. That is why we're talking about this issue today. Because if we mean that we really need to eradicate terrorism, we must make sure that we eradicate all forms of terrorism. And for me personally, I fully endorse the recommendations to the Committee of Ministers, because I think this is an issue that we need to put our heads together and fight together. But it has to be in a very real and true and sincere way. So we don't make difference between terrorism that has dual citizenship and a terrorism that is born and raised in Europe. Thank you so much.
Merci, monsieur. La parole est à monsieur Altuni Yildiz de Turquie.
Madam President,